The dust devil that swirled across Penelope Van Horn's porch that August morning in 1882 seemed like an omen, and when she saw the wagon approaching with her dead husband's family aboard, she knew trouble had arrived in flesh and blood. She stood in the doorway of the ranch house Thomas had built with his own hands 5 years ago, her calico dress stirring in the hot Colorado wind. Black Hawk sat nestled in the mountains behind her property, a mining town that had seen better days but still held enough life to support the ranchers who supplied beef to the miners. Thomas had chosen this land carefully, a stretch of fertile valley with good water and grazing that extended for 200 acres. Now he was 6 weeks in the ground, victim of a horse that spooked and threw him against the rocks, and Penelope was a widow at 24. The wagon creaked to a stop in front of the house. Harold Van Horn climbed down first, his thick mustache twitching as he surveyed the property with the calculating eyes of a man assessing merchandise. His wife Meredith followed, her pinched face already set in lines of disapproval. Behind them came Thomas's brother Edmund, younger by 2 years but harder somehow, with cold eyes that had never held warmth for Penelope even when Thomas was alive. Penelope. Harold didn't tip his hat or offer a greeting beyond her name. "We need to talk about the situation here." "There is no situation, Harold." Penelope kept her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "Thomas left the ranch to me. Everything is in order." Meredith sniffed loudly. "Left it to you? A woman alone with no children, no family, no ability to run a cattle operation. It is unseemly and impractical. I have been running this ranch alongside Thomas for 5 years. I know every head of cattle, every fence line, every water source." Penelope crossed her arms. "I am perfectly capable of continuing." Edmund stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. "We have had an offer from a mining company. They want to expand operations and need this land. They are willing to pay handsomely." The words hit Penelope like a physical blow. "This land is not for sale. Now see here." Harold's voice rose. "You are family and we want what is best for you. A young widow needs security. The money from this sale would set you up nicely. You could return east, find a suitable situation, perhaps remarry someone appropriate to your station. My station is here. This is my home. Thomas and I built this together." Penelope felt heat rising in her face, not from the sun but from anger. "I will not sell." "The legal situation is complicated," Edmund said, pulling papers from his coat. "Thomas's may have left the property to you, but there are debts. Father loaned Thomas money to purchase the original herd. That debt passes to you, and we are calling it in. Unless you can pay $2,500 by the end of September, we will have no choice but to force a sale to satisfy the debt." Penelope's hands went cold despite the August heat. $2,500. She had perhaps $300 in the bank, money saved from selling cattle. The rest of her wealth was tied up in livestock and land. Thomas never mentioned such a debt. Nevertheless, it exists. Harold's smile did not reach his eyes. "We have the documentation." "We do not wish to be harsh, Penelope, but business is business. Sell now to the mining company, and there will be enough to pay the debt and leave you comfortable. Refuse, and in 6 weeks you will have nothing." They left her standing on the porch, their wagon disappearing back toward Black Hawk in a cloud of dust that coated everything it touched. Penelope sank onto the bench Thomas had carved, her mind racing. She could fight them in court, but lawyers cost money she did not have. She could try to sell cattle quickly, but prices were low and she would never raise enough in 6 weeks. She could seek another loan, but no bank would lend to a woman without a husband or father to co-sign. The sound of hoofbeats brought her head up. A rider approached from the north pasture, sitting easy in the saddle despite the heat. She recognized him immediately. Jackson Miller had been working on neighboring ranches for the past 2 years, a cowboy with a reputation for fair dealing and hard work. He was perhaps 27 or 28, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled at his collar. His eyes, she had noticed during their few encounters in town, were a startling blue-gray that seemed to see more than most people revealed. Mrs. Van Horn. He touched his hat brim as he reined in near the porch. "Saw you had visitors. Everything all right?" The concern in his voice, genuine and without ulterior motive, nearly undid her composure. She found herself telling him everything, the words spilling out in a rush as he dismounted and listened with complete attention. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as he thought. "May I ask you something that might seem forward?" His voice was careful, respectful. "Given the circumstances, I cannot imagine anything more forward than what I am already facing. The debt is to you as Thomas's widow. If you were to remarry, a new husband would assume those debts, but also have legal standing to challenge them, negotiate them, or simply refuse to honor what sounds like a very convenient piece of paper that appeared only after Thomas died." Jackson met her eyes directly. "I am guessing they did not show you the actual documentation." "They did not." Hope flickered, small but stubborn. "But I cannot simply marry someone to solve a legal problem. That would be practical." A hint of humor touched his expression. "Mrs. Van Horn, I will be direct. I have been working for wages for 10 years, saving to buy land of my own. I have nearly enough, but land like this, already established with water and grazing, does not come available often. You need someone with legal standing as a husband to fight your in-law's claim and the credibility to run this ranch, so they cannot argue you are incapable. I need land and a future that does not involve sleeping in bunkhouses until I am too old to sit a horse. You are proposing a business arrangement." Penelope studied him, this cowboy she barely knew who was offering to tie his life to hers to save her home. "I am proposing a marriage that begins as a business arrangement," Jackson corrected. "What it becomes after that would be up to both of us. I will not force myself on you or expect anything beyond what you are willing to give. But as your husband, I can stand between you and your in-laws, fight their claims, and make sure this ranch stays in your hands. Why would you do this for a woman you barely know?" His smile was slight but genuine. "Because every time I have seen you in town, you have been kind to people others ignore. You treat the Chinese laundry workers with respect, you pay fair prices to the Mexican laborers, and you helped old Mrs. Chen when her husband died last winter. I figure a woman with that kind of heart and the strength to run a ranch alone deserves better than to be cheated by greedy relatives." He paused. "And because I would be getting a fair deal too. This ranch with your knowledge and my labor could be something extraordinary." Penelope looked out at the land Thomas had loved, the land she had poured her own sweat and dreams into. She thought of the cattle bearing her brand, the garden she had coaxed from the rocky soil, the house that held 5 years of memories. Then she thought of Harold's calculating eyes and Edmund's cold smile, and she made her decision. "If we do this, I want certain things understood. This ranch remains in my name. You would have full authority to run it and make decisions, but the deed stays mine. I will not go from one man controlling my life to another." "Agreed. I would want my name added to the deed after we are married, but as a joint owner, not sole owner. We build this together, we own it together. And if this arrangement does not work, if we find we cannot live together, then we negotiate a fair dissolution. I will not trap you, Penelope." The use of her first name felt intimate, a preview of the relationship they were agreeing to forge. You have my word on that. She extended her hand. Then I accept your proposal, Jackson Miller. His hand engulfed hers, calloused and strong but surprisingly gentle. When? As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if Reverend Walsh is available. The sooner we are married, the sooner we can present a united front to my in-laws. Tomorrow it is. Jackson's smile reached his eyes this time. I will ride to town now and make arrangements. May I come back this evening to discuss details? You may. In fact, you should probably move your things here tonight. If we are to be married tomorrow, it would make sense for you to already be in residence. After he left, Penelope stood on the porch and wondered if she had just made a brilliant decision or a terrible mistake. She barely knew Jackson Miller beyond his reputation and her own observations. He could be cruel behind closed doors, or careless with money, or have any number of vices hidden beneath that respectful exterior. But she also knew her alternatives, and anything was better than losing the land Thomas had died working. Jackson returned as the sun painted the mountains gold and crimson. He carried a worn saddle bag that appeared to contain all his worldly possessions, and led a sturdy bay gelding that looked as road-weary as its rider. Penelope showed him to the small room off the kitchen that Thomas had used as an office, now hastily converted with clean sheets on the narrow bed and a pitcher of water on the washstand. "It is not much," she apologized. "It is a roof and a real bed." "That is more than I have had most nights for the past 10 years. Jackson set his bag down carefully. "Reverend Walsh will marry us tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I took the liberty of informing the county clerk, who will have the marriage certificate ready to file immediately after the ceremony. You move quickly. When something needs doing, no point in dragging it out." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Penelope, I want you to know I understand this is not a normal courtship or marriage. I will respect your privacy and your person. I will sleep here until and unless you invite me elsewhere. I will work this ranch as hard as I have worked any job in my life, and I will stand between you and anyone who tries to take what is yours. That is my promise to you." Something in his directness, the absolute lack of artifice or manipulation, eased the knot of anxiety in her chest. "I believe you, and I promise to be honest with you, to work beside you as I did with Thomas, and to try to make this arrangement something neither of us regrets." They ate dinner together at the kitchen table, a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Penelope had prepared. The conversation flowed more easily than she had expected. Jackson told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, leaving home at 17 after his parents died of cholera, and working his way west through a series of ranches and cattle drives. He spoke matter-of-factly about hardship, but with humor about the characters he had met along the way. In turn, Penelope found herself sharing her own story. She had come from Pennsylvania, the daughter of a shopkeeper who died leaving debts. Thomas had been a customer in the store, a young man with dreams of the West and enough charm to sweep a frightened 19-year-old girl into marriage and adventure. Their life had been good, not perfect but good, built on mutual respect and shared work. "Do you miss him?" Jackson asked quietly. "Every day, but not in the way people expect, I think. I miss my partner, my friend. We were not a grand, passionate love story, but we were solid. We were a team." She met his eyes across the table. "I hope you and I can be that eventually, a team." "I would like that." His smile was warm. "Partners in ranch and life, even if the life part takes time to develop." That night, Penelope lay in the bed she had shared with Thomas and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in the house. Jackson moved quietly, but the old floorboards creaked and she could hear water pouring as he washed up. It felt strange but not unpleasant to not be alone. For 6 weeks, She had been the only person in this house, and the silence had been oppressive. Now there was life again, possibility and perhaps hope. The morning of her wedding day dawned clear and hot. Penelope dressed in her best dress, a deep blue cotton with lace at the collar that Thomas had bought her for their 3rd anniversary. She pinned her dark blonde hair up carefully and studied herself in the mirror. She looked tired, strange showing in the lines around her eyes, but determined. Today she was fighting for her future, and she would do it with her head held high. Jackson waited in the kitchen wearing clean clothes that looked new. He must have bought them in town yesterday, she realized. The dark trousers and white shirt fit him well, making him look less like a cowboy and more like a proper gentleman. His hair was neatly combed, his face cleanly shaved, and he held a small bouquet of wildflowers that must have taken him an early morning ride to gather. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her the flowers. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Penelope took the bouquet, touched by the gesture. "Shall we go get married?" They rode to town side by side, an odd wedding procession of just bride and groom without attendants or family. Black Hawk was already busy despite the early hour, miners heading to their shifts and merchants opening their stores. A few people stared as Penelope and Jackson passed, and she knew by nightfall the whole town would be buzzing with news of the widow Van Horn's hasty remarriage. Reverend Walsh waited at the small church at the edge of town. He was a kind man with more tolerance for human complexity than some clergy possessed, and his eyes held understanding as he greeted them. "Mrs. Van Horn, Mr. Miller." "I must say, I was surprised by the request for such a hasty wedding, but I understand there are practical considerations." "There are, Reverend, but I want you to know this is my choice freely made." Penelope needed him to hear that, to know she was not being coerced. "I can see that." "Very well, let us begin." The ceremony was brief, the traditional words given weight by the seriousness of the commitment despite the unusual circumstances. When Reverend Walsh asked if anyone objected to the union, Penelope half expected her in-laws to burst through the door. But the church remained quiet except for their voices. "Do you, Jackson Michael Miller, take Penelope Ann Van Horn to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Jackson's voice was steady, his eyes on Penelope's face. "And do you, Penelope Ann Van Horn, take Jackson Michael Miller to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Her own voice surprised her with its firmness. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. Jackson, you may kiss your bride." Jackson leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. His lips touched hers softly, briefly, a kiss that sealed their bargain without presuming intimacy she had not offered. When he pulled back, his eyes held a question, and she gave him a small smile in answer. This would be all right. They would be all right. The county clerk filed their marriage certificate with efficient speed, and suddenly Penelope was Mrs. Jackson Miller, a name she would need time to grow accustomed to. They emerged from the courthouse into the bright sunlight, legally bound to each other, and found Harold Meredith and Edmund Van Horn waiting by their horses. "Penelope, what have you done?" Meredith's face was mottled with anger. "I've gotten married, as you can see." Penelope kept her voice calm. "Allow me to introduce my husband, Jackson Miller." Harold's mustache quivered. "This is highly irregular. Highly irregular. You have known this man for what, a day, 2 days?" "I have known him for 2 years by reputation and observation. which is more than many brides can say of their husbands. But my marriage is none of your concern, Harold. What is your concern is that, as my husband, Jackson now has the legal authority to examine this supposed debt you claim Thomas owed you. There is nothing supposed about it. Edmund's voice was hard. The debt is real and documented. Then you will have no trouble presenting that documentation to me. Jackson stepped forward, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. As Penelope's husband, I am responsible for her debts, which means I have every right to verify their legitimacy. I will also be speaking to a lawyer about the timing of your claim and whether attempting to force a sale while your daughter-in-law was in the vulnerable position of being a new widow constitutes undue pressure or fraud. How dare you, Harold blustered. We are family. Family that is attempting to rob a widow and sell her home out from under her. Where I come from, we have a different name for people who do that. Jackson's voice remained mild, but steel ran underneath. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to provide me with complete documentation of this alleged debt, including the original loan agreement, any payment records, and proof that Thomas acknowledged the debt. I will have it examined by a lawyer. If the debt is legitimate and was entered into knowingly by Thomas, we will negotiate a reasonable payment plan. If it is not legitimate or if we find evidence of fraud, you will withdraw your claim and leave my wife alone. Are we clear? You cannot speak to me this way, you jumped-up cowhand. Harold's face was now bright red. I can and I am. I am a married man speaking in defense of his wife's interests. You are welcome to take the matter to court, where I am confident a judge will be very interested in the convenient timing of your claim. Jackson took Penelope's arm gently. Now, if you will excuse us, my wife and I have a ranch to run. They left the Van Horns sputtering in the street and rode home side by side. Penelope felt lighter than she had in weeks, the burden of facing her in-laws alone lifted from her shoulders. That was remarkably satisfying to witness. Jackson grinned. I have been dealing with bullies my whole life. They all operate the same way. Show them you will not be intimidated and most of them fold. Do you really think they are trying to defraud me? I think the timing is suspicious. I think legitimate creditors do not wait until after someone dies to demand immediate payment. And I think people who cared about you as family would have offered help and support, not threats and ultimatums. He glanced at her. But I will reserve final judgment until I see their documentation. It is possible Thomas did borrow money from them and just never mentioned it. He told me everything about the ranch finances. We reviewed the books together every month. Penelope shook her head. If there was a debt to his family, I cannot imagine why he would hide it. Then we proceed on the assumption that something is not right and investigate accordingly. I know a lawyer in Denver who is honest and does not charge the earth. I will write to him tonight. Back at the ranch, they fell into an easy rhythm of work. Jackson proved to be every bit as capable as his reputation suggested. He spent the afternoon riding the property with Penelope, learning the layout and assessing the condition of the fences, water sources, and cattle. He asked intelligent questions and listened carefully to her answers, treating her knowledge with respect rather than dismissing her as a mere woman who could not possibly understand ranching. You have good instincts, he told her as they rode back toward the house in the golden light of evening. The way you have managed the water rights, rotating the grazing areas, it is smart ranching. Some men with twice the land do not do half as well. The praise warmed her more than it should have. Thomas and I learned together. He grew up on a farm, not a cattle ranch, so we figured it out as we went. You figured it right. Jackson dismounted and came around to help her down, his hand steady at her waist. For a moment, They stood close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue-gray eyes, and something flickered between them, a spark of awareness that was not merely professional partnership. Penelope stepped back, flustered. "I should start dinner. Let me help. I am a fair hand at cooking over a campfire. A stove should be similar, just less smoky." They worked together in the kitchen, and Penelope found herself laughing as Jackson told stories about disastrous attempts at trail cooking, including one incident involving a burned skunk that ruined dinner for an entire camp. His humor was dry and self-deprecating, and she realized she was enjoying herself more than she had in months. After dinner, Jackson excused himself to write his letter to the Denver lawyer while Penelope cleaned up. She found herself hyper-aware of his presence in the house, the sound of his pen scratching across paper, the creak of his chair. This man was her husband now, legally bound to her, and she still barely knew him. Yet something about him felt right, felt safe, in a way that eased fears she had not fully acknowledged. When she finished in the kitchen, she found Jackson sitting at Thomas's old desk, frowning at a ledger. "I hope you do not mind. I wanted to review the ranch accounts to understand the full financial picture." "Of course, you are entitled to see everything." Penelope came to look over his shoulder. "What are you frowning about? These numbers. You have been very careful with money, keeping expenses low and building savings. But I also see where Thomas made some large purchases in the months before he died. New equipment, an expensive breeding bull, repairs to the barn. All legitimate expenses, but they depleted your cash reserves significantly. He said we needed to invest in improvements to increase productivity." Penelope studied the entries, seeing them in a new light. "Do you think he knew about the debt and was trying to build up the ranch's value before having to pay it? Possibly. Or possibly someone knew he was making these purchases and saw an opportunity. If your in-laws had been watching the ranch's finances, they would have known your cash reserves were low, making you vulnerable to exactly the kind of pressure they are applying." The thought sent a chill through Penelope despite the evening warmth. That would mean they had been planning this even before Thomas died. "Like I said, I am reserving judgment until we see documentation, but something does not smell right about this whole situation." Jackson closed the ledger. "For now, we focus on running the ranch well and building our case. The fall cattle sale is in 6 weeks. If we can bring our herd in at a good weight and get fair prices, we will have enough money to satisfy any legitimate debt and keep comfortable reserves. The cattle are in good condition. We should do well. Then, that is our plan. Work hard, sell well, and in the meantime, let my lawyer friend in Denver dig into whether your in-laws have any legal leg to stand on." Over the following days, Penelope and Jackson settled into a partnership that felt increasingly natural. They rose early and worked side by side, riding out to check on cattle, mending fences, and preparing for the fall sale. Jackson was a tireless worker who never asked her to do less because she was a woman, but also never hesitated to help with heavy lifting or dangerous tasks. They learned each other's rhythms, developing the wordless communication that made good working partners. In the evenings, they sat on the porch as the heat faded and talked about everything and nothing. Jackson told her about the places he had been, the ranches he had worked, the characters he had known. Penelope shared memories of her childhood, her parents, the journey west with Thomas. Slowly, they were building something more than a business arrangement, though neither spoke of it directly. 10 days after their wedding, Harold Van Horn appeared at the ranch with a leather portfolio. His manner was stiff, barely civil, as he handed Jackson a sheaf of papers. "The documentation you demanded. As you will see, the debt is entirely legitimate." Jackson did not invite him in or offer refreshment. He simply took the papers and studied them carefully, his expression unreadable. Penelope watched from the doorway, her heart pounding. Everything hinged on what those documents contained. After a long silence, Jackson looked up. "This is a promissory note for $2,000, dated March of 1878, signed by Thomas. It stipulates repayment within 5 years at 10% interest, which makes the current debt, with interest, $2,500, Harold said smugly. As I told Penelope. The 5 years ended in March of this year. Thomas had not made a single payment. Now the debt passes to his widow, and I am within my rights to call it in, if this is legitimate." Jackson's voice was mild. "I find it curious that there is no record of this loan in Thomas's ranch accounts. He kept meticulous records of every expense, every purchase, every debt. Yet this supposedly substantial loan has no corresponding entry. That is not my concern. Perhaps he kept a separate account book. Perhaps. Or perhaps this document was created recently and backdated." Jackson tapped the paper. "I am sending this to a lawyer in Denver who specializes in document authentication. He will be able to determine whether the ink and paper are consistent with something written in 1878 or whether they are more recent." Harold's face flushed. "You are calling me a liar and a forger. I am exercising due diligence in examining a suspicious claim. If the document is authentic, you will have your money on a reasonable payment schedule. If it is not, I will see you prosecuted for fraud and attempted theft." Jackson's voice remained calm, but his eyes were hard. "I suggest you leave now. You will hear from our lawyer within 3 weeks." After Harold left in a cloud of dust and outrage, Penelope sagged against the door frame. "Do you really think it is a forgery? I think something is wrong with it. The signature looks right, but the paper is too clean, too crisp for something supposedly 4 years old. And the terms are odd. Why would a father loan his son money at interest? Why would Thomas not tell you about such a substantial debt? Why would Harold wait until after Thomas died and you were vulnerable to demand payment?" Jackson set the papers aside carefully. "But we will know for certain soon enough. My lawyer friend is very good at spotting forgeries. What do we do while we wait? We keep working. We prepare for the cattle sale. We live our lives." He smiled at her, and she felt the now familiar flutter in her chest that his smiles produced. "We trust that the truth will come out." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of hard work and growing comfort. Penelope found herself watching Jackson as he worked, admiring the economical grace of his movements, the quiet competence with which he handled every task. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing when they were working separate parts of the ranch, looking forward to their evenings together on the porch. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Jackson reached over and took her hand. The gesture was simple, almost casual, but it sent warmth flooding through her. She laced her fingers through his and they sat in comfortable silence, connected by touch and growing affection. "This is nice," Jackson said softly. "I did not expect to find this when I offered to marry you. What did you expect? A business arrangement? Separate lives under one roof, working toward a common goal but remaining essentially alone." He turned to look at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had not seen before. "What I found is someone I enjoy spending time with, someone who makes me laugh, someone I think about when we are apart. I am finding more than a partner, Penelope. I am finding a friend and maybe, if you are willing, something more." Her heart raced. "I think I am finding the same thing. I did not expect to feel this way again, especially so soon after losing Thomas. But what I feel for you is different from what I felt for him. Not better or worse, just different, newer, maybe more exciting. I do not want to rush you or pressure you. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. But I want you to know that my feelings are changing, growing into something beyond our original agreement. Mine too. Penelope took a breath, feeling brave and terrified all at once. Jackson, I do not want you sleeping in that little room anymore. I want you with me if you want that too. His smile was slow and warm, lighting his whole face. I want that very much, but are you sure? I do not want you to feel obligated. I am sure. This has been growing between us since the beginning, and I do not want to deny it any more. She stood, still holding his hand, and drew him to his feet. Come to bed with me, husband. That night, they came together with a tenderness that took Penelope's breath away. Jackson was patient and gentle, taking time to learn what pleased her, showing her without words how much he valued her. It was different from her experiences with Thomas, more intense and passionate, and afterward, as she lay in Jackson's arms listening to his heartbeat slow, she felt a completeness she had not known was missing. No regrets, he murmured against her hair. None. You. Only that we did not do this sooner. His arms tightened around her. I love you, Penelope. I did not plan to, but I do. I love you too. The words came easily, naturally, because they were true. I think I started falling for you that first day when you offered to help me without expecting anything in return except a fair partnership. That worked out pretty well for me. She could hear the smile in his voice. I got the land I wanted and the woman I did not know I needed. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since Thomas died, Penelope felt truly at peace. She had not just survived the storm her in-laws had tried to create. She had found something better on the other side. 3 days later, a telegram arrived from Denver. Jackson read it twice, then handed it to Penelope with a grim expression. The document is a forgery. The paper is consistent with 1882 manufacture, not 1878. The ink is less than 3 months old. Thomas's signature appears to be traced from some other document, probably something he actually signed. Rage, hot and fierce, flooded through Penelope. They tried to steal my ranch with a fake document. They tried to rob me using a forgery of their own son's signature. They did, and now we are going to make sure they pay for it. Jackson's voice was hard. My lawyer is already filing charges with the territorial court. Harold and Edmund Van Horn will be arrested for fraud and attempted theft. Meredith may face charges as an accessory if they can prove she knew about the scheme. Good. Penelope felt no mercy, no family loyalty. They had tried to destroy her, to take everything Thomas had worked for, and she wanted justice. When? The marshal should be arresting them today. There will be a trial, probably in about a month. We will have to testify. I will be there, and I will tell the truth about everything they did, every threat they made, every attempt to pressure and frighten me into giving up my home. The trial, when it came in late September, was the talk of Black Hawk. The courtroom was packed with curious townspeople eager to see the Van Horns face justice. Penelope sat beside Jackson in the front row, her hand in his, and watched as the prosecutor laid out the case with methodical precision. The forged document was entered into evidence. The document expert from Denver explained in detail how he had determined it was fake. Thomas's real account books were presented, showing no record of any loan from his family. And then Penelope took the stand and told her story, every detail of how her in-laws had appeared after Thomas's death with their demands and threats, how they had tried to force her to sell before she could properly grieve or consult with anyone. Harold's lawyer tried to paint her as a gold digger who had married Thomas for his money, and then quickly replaced him with another man when he died. But Jackson's lawyer demolished that argument, showing the timeline of events and Penelope's desperation to save her home. He also called character witnesses, townspeople who testified to Penelope's integrity and kindness, and to Jackson's reputation as an honest, hard-working man. Edmund took the stand and tried to claim he had known nothing about the forgery, that his father had shown him the document and he had assumed it was real. But under cross-examination, he contradicted himself repeatedly, and it became clear he had been complicit in the scheme from the beginning. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Harold Van Horn guilty of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Edmund was convicted on the same charges. Meredith was found not guilty due to lack of evidence that she had known the document was forged, but her reputation in Black Hawk was destroyed. The judge sentenced Harold to 5 years in prison and Edmund to 3. He also ordered them to pay restitution to Penelope for her legal expenses and emotional suffering. "You attempted to defraud a grieving widow, to steal the property her husband worked himself to death to build," the judge said, his voice cold with contempt. "You dishonor the memory of your son and brother. You disgrace the concept of family. This court has no mercy for men like you." Penelope felt Jackson's arm around her shoulders as the Van Horns were led away in chains. It was over. Her ranch was safe, her marriage was legal and unchallenged, and the people who had tried to destroy her would spend years paying for their greed. As they walked out of the courthouse into the autumn sunshine, Jackson pulled her close and kissed her, not caring who saw. "It is done." "You are free of them. We are free of them," Penelope corrected. "We did this together." They rode home to the ranch, and Penelope felt like she was seeing it with new eyes. The land stretched out golden in the fall light, cattle dotting the pastures, the house sitting solid and welcoming at the center of it all. This was hers. Theirs. No one could take it now. The cattle sale 2 weeks later went even better than hoped. Prices were strong, and their well-fed herd commanded premium prices. Jackson handled the negotiations with skill, getting every dollar the cattle were worth and more. They came home with enough money to see them through the winter in comfort and to invest in improvements for the spring. That night, Penelope cooked a celebratory dinner with the best beef from their own herd, fresh vegetables from her garden, and a pie made from the last of the summer berries she had preserved. They ate by candlelight and toasted their success with wine Jackson had bought in town. "To partnership," Jackson said, raising his glass. "To love," Penelope countered, smiling at him across the table. "To both." They drank, and then Jackson reached across the table to take her hand. "I have been thinking about the future, about what we want to build here." "What have you been thinking?" "That this ranch could support a larger herd, that we could buy the Peterson place if they are still looking to sell, that we could build something lasting, something to pass on." He paused, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "That maybe we should think about a family to pass it on to." Penelope's breath caught. "You want children?" "I do, if you do. I know it has only been a few months since Thomas died, and I do not want to pressure you, but when you are ready, I would like to have a family with you." "I would like that too." Penelope felt joy bubbling up inside her. "I wanted children with Thomas, but it never happened. Maybe we were not together long enough, or maybe it just was not meant to be, but with you, I feel like everything is possible." "Yes, Jackson." "Yes, I want to build a family with you." He came around the table and pulled her to her feet, kissing her with a passion that still thrilled her even after months of marriage. "Then let us start building right now." Winter came to Black Hawk with snow that blanketed the ranch in white silence. Penelope and Jackson spent the cold months working side by side, caring for the cattle, maintaining equipment, and planning for the spring. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked about their dreams, their hopes, the future they were creating together. By January, Penelope knew she was pregnant. She told Jackson on a snowy evening as they sat watching the fire, his arm around her shoulders. "We are going to have a baby." The joy on his face was beautiful to see. He pulled her into his lap, holding her carefully as if she were made of glass. "When? Late summer, I think. August or early September. A baby." He sounded awed. "Our baby. Penelope, you have made me so happy." "You have made me happy, too. You saved me, Jackson. You saved my ranch and my future, and you gave me love I did not think I would find again. You saved me right back. I was just drifting, working for wages, going nowhere. You gave me a home, a purpose, and a love I did not know existed." He kissed her softly. "We saved each other." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite the harsh winter. Jackson was attentive and protective without being overbearing, taking on the heavier tasks, but never trying to stop Penelope from doing the work she loved. They bought the Peterson place in March, adding another 100 acres to their holdings, and hired 2 cowhands to help with the expanded operation. As summer approached and Penelope's belly swelled with their growing child, they prepared the house for the new arrival. Jackson built a beautiful cradle from oak, carving it with patient care. Penelope sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. Their son was born on a hot August afternoon in 1883, exactly 1 year after Harold Van Horn had first appeared to threaten Penelope's security. Jackson held her hand through the long labor and cried when he first held his son. They named him Thomas, after the man whose death had brought them together, and Michael after Jackson's father. Baby Thomas was a healthy, lusty infant with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Jackson was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Penelope for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at the tiny miracle they had created. "I never thought I would have this," he told Penelope one evening as she nursed Thomas and Jackson sat beside them, his arm around her shoulders. "A wife I love, a son, a home of my own. I thought I would spend my life working other people's land, sleeping in bunkhouses, growing old alone. You gave me everything. You gave me everything too, a partnership, protection when I needed it, and a love I did not dare hope for. I think Thomas would be happy that his ranch is thriving and that I found someone to share it with. I hope so. I would like to think we are honoring his memory by building on what he started." 2 years passed in hard work and happiness. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They bought more cattle, improved their breeding program, and became known throughout the territory for producing quality beef. Baby Thomas grew into a curious toddler who loved following his father around the ranch, and Penelope found herself pregnant again in the spring of 1885. Their daughter was born in December, a Christmas baby they named Patricia Rose. She had Jackson's blue-gray eyes and Penelope's blonde hair, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Thomas, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Life settled into a rich pattern of family and work. The years rolled by with the seasons, each bringing its own challenges and rewards. They survived hard winters and dry summers, low cattle prices and good years, always working together, always supporting each other. In 1887, they received word that Harold Van Horn had died in prison, his health broken by incarceration. Edmund was released after serving his 3 years, but he left Colorado and they never heard from him again. Meredith had moved to California to live with a sister, and Penelope felt no guilt about the Van Horn family's dissolution. They had brought it on themselves through greed and cruelty. By 1890, the ranch had grown to over 500 acres. They employed 6 cowhands year-round, and had become one of the most successful operations in the region. Thomas was 9, a capable rider already learning the ranching business. Patricia was 5, a bright, curious girl who loved helping her mother in the garden and learning to read. And Penelope was pregnant again, expecting their 3rd child in the fall. On a warm evening in August, Penelope and Jackson sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was teaching Patricia to rope a fence post, both of them laughing when the loop missed and landed in the dirt. Penelope's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby move. "You ever think about that day 8 years ago when I rode up and offered to marry you?" Jackson asked, taking her hand. "Sometimes. I think about how terrified I was, how desperate. I think about taking a chance on a man I barely knew because I had no other choice." Penelope smiled at him. "And then I think about how that desperate choice turned into the greatest blessing of my life." "I think about it too. I think about how close I came to riding past that day, to minding my own business and leaving you to face your troubles alone. If I had not seen your in-laws leaving, if I had not stopped to check on you, our whole lives would be different. But you did stop. You offered help when I needed it most. You gave me protection and partnership, and then you gave me love." Penelope lifted his hand to her lips. "You are the best man I have ever known, Jackson Miller. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope Miller." He pulled her close as her pregnant belly would allow. "I love you more now than I did 8 years ago, and I will love you more 8 years from now. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Their children's laughter filled the air. The cattle lowed in the distance. The land stretched out around them, fertile and productive, a testament to their hard work and partnership. In September, Penelope gave birth to another son, whom they named James Andrew. Jackson held her hand through the delivery and cried again, as he had with each of their children, overwhelmed by the miracle of new life and the depth of his love for his family. As the years continued to pass, their ranch became legendary in the region. People spoke of the Millers as the model of what hard work, fair dealing, and genuine partnership could achieve. Young couples starting out would come to ask advice, and Penelope and Jackson were always generous with their time and knowledge. Thomas grew into a fine young man, capable of running the ranch on his own by the time he was 18. Patricia married the son of a neighboring rancher in a wedding that brought the whole territory together in celebration. James proved to have a head for business and took over managing the financial side of the operation, allowing Jackson to focus on the work he loved best. By 1905, Penelope and Jackson had been married for 23 years. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their bodies marked by decades of hard work. But their love had only deepened with time, the passion of their early years mellowing into a profound partnership that encompassed every aspect of their lives. One evening, as they sat on the porch where they had spent so many hours over the years, Jackson took Penelope's hand. "Do you remember what I told you the day I proposed? That I was offering a marriage that began as a business arrangement, and what it became would be up to both of us. I remember. I also remember being terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Look at what it became." Jackson gestured at the ranch spread out before them. The house expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, the barns and outbuildings, the thousands of acres of productive land. "Look at what we built together. Look at who we built together." Penelope nodded toward the house, where their grandchildren were visiting, the sound of young voices and laughter drifting through the open windows. 3 children, 6 grandchildren so far, and a legacy that will last for generations. All because I stopped to check on a woman I barely knew, and she was brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream. All because a good man saw someone in trouble and offered help without expectation of reward. You could have ridden past that day, Jackson. You could have decided my problems were not your concern, but you did not. You stopped, you helped, and you changed both our lives. Jackson pulled her close, and they sat watching the sun set as they had done thousands of times before. The land they had fought for and built together stretched out around them, a testament to courage, love, and the power of partnership. And as the last light faded from the sky, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that even if she could go back and change things, she would not. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it to arrive at this moment, with this man, in this life they had created together. Their story, born of desperation and pragmatism, had become something neither of them could have imagined that hot August day in 1882, when a cowboy offered marriage to save a widow's ranch. It had become a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the greatest loves begin not with romance but with respect, not with passion but with partnership, and grow into something that endures through decades and across generations. As night fell over the Colorado mountains and the stars began to appear in the vast western sky, Penelope and Jackson sat together in the home they had built and the life they had created, surrounded by family and love and the land they had fought so hard to keep. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be, the happy ending they had earned through courage, faith, and love that grew stronger with each passing year.